Good evening, everyone. My name is Leonard Abramsky, and I'm proud to be this year's co-chair of the UJA annual campaign. This year is a very special year, as all of you have experienced in the last 2 months. We have launched a very special campaign this year called the Emergency Campaign for Community Resilience. And it is absolutely that. This is an emergency, this is a war, and this war is not taking place on the Golan or in Sderot. This war is at Bathurst and Lawrence, Bathurst and Eglinton, Bathurst and Highway 7, Young Street Agency in ever. But I can tell you, as difficult as it has been for all of us, it has been more difficult for a great many number of our members of our Jewish community. Those members that use the services of Jewish Family and Child Services, Jewish Addiction, the Bernard Battelle Center, our day schools, our camps, our JCCs, and even those in Vahafta are looking for rent assistance. Everybody is feeling it. This year, we have launched a campaign to raise over $85 million for the UJA campaign this year. And it is an increase of $25 million, which not only that, but the major total campaign is going towards the emergency services required for our Jewish community this year. I invite you to listen to this seminar tonight, learn a lot from great expertise around this table, but most importantly, think about those less fortunate than yourselves, and when you are contacted by a member of our community with respect to UJA, we encourage you to think twice and give often, as it is important this year more than ever for the basis of our campaign. With that, I would like to first of all acknowledge our sponsor, Scotiabank, who is a very generous sponsor of tonight's event. And I'd like to introduce Jesse Abrams, the founder and CEO of Homebuyers. Jesse, take it away, and thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Leonard. Really happy to be here with an amazing panel tonight to talk about the current state of the real estate marketplace. There's this great Mike Tyson quote that everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. And the real estate market has been growing like crazy for the last 13 years, and we finally have that time of question. So really looking forward to speaking with all of you and learning from you. And I want to have you introduce all yourself. So Risa, let's start with you.
My name is Risa Sud. I want to thank the UJA and the Jewish Foundation for asking me to be part of the panel for this evening's residential real estate webinar. I've been a realtor at Forest Hill Real Estate for the past 32 years. I was one of the first 5 agents at the Spadina office, and I have been a volunteer for the United Jewish Appeal and Jewish Foundation for the past 35 years. Mostly in the real estate division, and now I'm doing the Line of Judah Endowment Initiative. I'm very happy to be here, and I thank you for asking me.
Thanks, Risa. Bob, love to hear from you next.
My name is Bob Aaron. I want to thank the UJA and the Jewish Foundation again. I want to repeat the thanks for inviting us here. We have a lot of people online today watching us. I have been a Toronto real estate lawyer through, unfortunately, the last 4 major recessions we've had, starting on April the 9th, 1974. I'm also the real estate law columnist in the Toronto Star. I'm an ex officio bencher or director of the Law Society of Upper Canada, a past director of the Tarion Warranty Corporation. I've done a lot of media appearances on TV and radio, and I frequently lecture to groups of lawyers and real estate agents.
Great. Thanks, Bob. And last, Michael.
Thank you. I'm going to skip my intro and just tell a quick story about UJA. People keep saying that we're all in the same boat. Well, someone wise said it's actually not true. We're all in the same storm. We're all in different boats. Some people are in yachts and some people are in life rafts. And the work at UJA helps those in life rafts. I learned outside of the UJA about 2,500 Holocaust survivors living under the poverty line in Toronto. And I brought it up to Neil Uditsky at UJA. He said, we have a campaign specifically for that. It's called Race Against Time. And it's a $20 million campaign over 10 years, and it's matched 20 times by the German government as part of the reparations program. And I just wanted to make mention, talking about community outreach, when Neil and I discussed that, he, Janice Benatar, and the co-chair of the 2019 campaign, Karen Simpson, came to our house to discuss with our daughter, who wanted to donate her bat mitzvah money to this organization, all about the tremendous work that's being done in the community. This is outside of the campaign, specifically for these survivors. So that tells all of us that no one gets left behind by this incredible umbrella organization for the Jewish community. So I'll skip my intro and let the questions begin. Now we can talk about real estate after my plug for that organization. If you're interested to speak to Janice, J. Benatar, ujfed.org. Thank you. Jesse, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Well, the burning question that seems to be everywhere right now when we talk about real estate is, do you feel that lower prices are finally going to come? And Risa, would love your thoughts on what you're seeing right now.
Well, it's been about 8 weeks since this all has started, and people have started actually to adjust to a new normal. We have a whole new way of doing business. So I actually think it depends on the price point and the motivation of the seller. But as of yet, I personally have not seen prices coming down. The high-end homes, though, will be the ones that will be most affected, because there will be those people looking at those homes that have homes to sell. And as we know, if you don't have any reason to put your house up for sale now, you should wait. First-time buyer properties are still seeing multiple offers. We have actually seen price reductions on homes which would account for some of the sales, but those homes were too highly priced to begin with. In any market condition, if a property is priced properly, it will get activity immediately and will sell. But certainly, if a property is priced below market value, it will get multiple offers. The necessary social distancing and economic impact associated with COVID-19 has impacted home sales and listings. But interestingly, prices have stayed steady. There have been enough active buyers relative to listings to keep prices in line with last year's levels. The volume of sales and the volumes of listings are what's dramatically down. The Toronto Real Estate Board reported that home sale transactions are down 67% from last year at this time, and listings are down 64% from last year at this time. The number of active buyers has been reduced, especially in the higher end homes. They are backing off and sitting back and holding tight. But life circumstances and immigration always plays a factor in keeping the real estate market active, and that will not change.
Yeah, some great points. And one other question that we've been getting is, you know, the social distancing thing has only been going on now for about 2 months. So Michael, do you find that we could even say where the market's going to go just yet?
No, I don't have to tell you that I'm working from home. Our kids just arrived. Hi, guys. Hi. So to answer that question, it is early, definitely. And we're seeing numbers, you know, the Toronto Real Estate Board just came out with the numbers, and Risa had some excellent points specifically related to that. So unit sales are down 67%. Prices are only off about 1.5%. But if you look at the entire month of April, where we really felt COVID-19, prices were down about 7.8% month over month. So March 20 versus April 20. But if you look at April 20 versus April 19, prices are at 820 on average. But I think it's early, and there's, you know, Risa talked about something very interesting in terms of immigration. What's interesting is that 80% of our population growth comes from immigration, and that's really taken a stall right now. So it's a wait and see. So I think it's a little premature, Jesse, to determine what the market is. There's so few unit sales, only 3,000 last month, that it's early to tell right now. So it's early days.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a great point, and especially because a lot of the slowdown right now has happened just because we're all in home. But one of the things that we've been talking about in my office, because we work in the mortgage space, is that there's been these 6-month mortgage deferrals, not to mention a lot more leniency in terms of the banks not actually able to seize a property if there's a default. So Bob, would love your thoughts on if you think that 6, 12 months from now, 2 years from now, is when we're going to start to see some issues in the marketplace and maybe some major changes at that point.
Well, okay, just before we went into lockdown, I took my crystal ball and put it in the dry cleaners. And I can't get it back now because the dry cleaners are out of business. They're locked down. So my ability to see into the future is somewhat hampered. But I have to say that who would have thought that the government would step in and fund businesses, landlords, just individuals with trillions of dollars that they don't have, both north and south of the border. And I think, yes, if there's a 6-month deferral and the people are still suffering, rather than have people out on the streets, I think the government's just going to have to come up with 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. So we're in new territory. We've never had the government go into such debt as they're going now just to keep the economy floating. And I think they're going to have no choice.
Yeah, it's a lot of guessing right now in terms of what would happen. And obviously a lot of you were around in 2008, the last time we had a drop in the market. To that point, Michael, when you look at the fact that all these deferrals are going to come to an end 6 months from now, and a lot of people might not be able to afford their homes, do you see there being a liquidation at that point? And maybe using history as an example, that might have happened a bit in 2008?
Well, to Bob's point, if you look at where the bailout numbers are, in 2008, the government, I believe, spent 50 billion. We're already at 180 billion. So it just gives you an idea of the scope and the magnitude of where we are right now. So I think it's difficult to say where things are going to be 6 months from now, but I do want to make mention of the fact about how resilient the Toronto real estate market has been throughout time. If you look at 2008, south of the border, places like California and Las Vegas took years to recover. We really only had 2 down quarters, the last quarter of 08 and the first quarter of 09. And the last 3 quarters of 09 were screaming hot. So if you look back at what's happened to Toronto, I mean, obviously nothing like this to this magnitude, but if you look at the history, even in the last couple of years, the stress test, the 15% foreign buyers tax, then you look further back with GST, HST on commission, and then HST on new builds. All of these different things get thrown at the Toronto real estate market, and it just keeps coming back. And I think what people forget is that what they haven't canceled, they've canceled a lot of things. They haven't canceled the future. And I'm very bullish on Toronto. People are looking to diversify their portfolios. People are wanting to spend more money on real estate as opposed to stocks. There's less volatility. And again, you can't live in a stock portfolio. If you ask most people what's been the best investment that they've made, they would tell you their home. There's a great statistic that I like to quote, that in the last 44 years, if you bought a home and held it for a minimum of 7 years, you've made money on it. No matter when you bought it, it made no difference whatsoever. So I don't think everyone can say that with their stock portfolio. Mm-hmm. So 6 months down the road, I think you're going to see that there's going to be a lot of pent-up demand, and God willing, this situation will be behind us. But there's going to be a lot of pent-up demand, and there is a lot of money in this city. It's the greatest transition of wealth ever to happen in the history of humankind, not just in Toronto, but around the world, this generation. So there are a lot of buyers, and most of them right now are sitting on the sidelines, pressing the pause button. So I'm quite confident 6 months, 12 months down the road.
Right. We mentioned Toronto being such a strong market, but a lot of people on the line might have cottages, they might have homes outside of Toronto. Risa, how do you see this affecting the cottage country? Will it increase prices? Will it decrease prices? How do you see this going?
So I personally do not work cottage country area, but after speaking to a few of my colleagues who do work those areas, they've reported that the spring market is just starting there. So there's not enough product again, and people are still out there looking, and people are still out buying but everything again is price driven, even in the cottage country. It's probably too soon to say. We're now middle of May. Maybe we have to give it a few more months just to see what the fallout is going to be with the cottages. But we'll probably get a better indicator over the summer months. But I think that the job losses and some of the financial losses may contribute to the cottage market a little bit. But again, if there's, you know, a lot of demand and no supply, it will be a strong market. Now, and it's interesting to note that in the past few years, cottage buying is actually being a year-round market. It has not been a seasonal market as it was in the, you know, much in the past. But we, as I said, there's still a strong demand for cottages and not enough supply.
Yeah, it's interesting. And sort of to bleed that in for you, Michael, based on the cottage market as well as the building marketplace, do you see either of those being affected as well in terms of price changes in any sort of way?
Yeah, I mean, real estate, you know, if you want to look at the three big lakes and Muskoka specifically, the demand has been through the roof in the last couple of years. We have an office in Port Carling, and it's just been incredible, the demand. I think that's going to slow a little bit right now. Marinas were given the go-ahead to be able to prep the marinas for a season. Hopefully we have that. But I think a lot of people, I think there's going, once they give the all clear in cottage country in terms of being able, that the lakes will be open, I think there's going to be a big demand for rental cottages to start with. And I think there's going to be a lot of people who have been locked in the city who are looking for an excuse to get north. And hotels, I don't think, are going to be the ideal option this summer. And so I think the rental market is going to be incredibly hot.
Great. And Bob, you know, when Michael was mentioning the B20 stress test earlier and how it's become harder and harder in some ways to actually, for people to apply for a mortgage, afford a mortgage in that sense. Do you think that COVID is going to have an impact on first-time home buyers right now and their ability to qualify for a mortgage? Do you see any new regulations coming in, such as there's talk around HELOCs maybe leaving? What do you think about that?
I believe in real estate for the long term. For me, 25 years is kind of just medium term. I have on my desk at the office 4 deep gouges, one for each recession I've lived through as a lawyer, starting in 74, 81, 89, and 2008. And I've suffered through those. My clients have suffered through those. Yes, there have been problems. Yes, there has been a lot of litigation and probably a lot more coming from this pandemic. But still, the general curve, if you look at the real estate market for the last 70 years, or maybe since the end of the war, the curve, with a few blips, the curve is up. And I think, yes, there may be some effects. New builds may be affected. First-time buyers may have problems in getting back in or getting in. But eventually, this will all straighten itself out. There is a very strong underlying demand, and I'm cautiously optimistic.
Great. You know, there's a classic line in the Toronto real estate market: when should I buy? The answer is always now. First-time home buyers have sort of been sitting on the sidelines for a while saying, you know what, the bubble's going to pop. I want to get in there. It's time for me to eventually get in the market the second it dips. Marisa, what suggestion would you give to first-time home buyers just in this state? How should they be planning?
Well, unfortunately, first-time home buyers, we are still seeing multiple offers, especially on prices that are under $1 million. Like, I personally was in 2 offers last week on homes that were under $1 million. I was in 10 offers on one of them and 8 offers on another one. Now, if it was pre-COVID, there might have been 15 offers on one of them and, you know, 10 offers on the other. So it's because there's just no supply and there's so many people looking, you know, because it's in the city of Toronto. There's not a lot of product out there. Also, if we see more product come out, then we may see, you know, a sort of a slowdown in the multiple offers, but I really don't think so. Pre-COVID, there was a lot of demand, and there's still a lot of demand. Only the number of first-time buyers may have dropped due to financial instability. That's probably the difference now. But I mean, you have 10 offers, you have 5 offers on something, it's still going to sell for over asking. Also, it may be harder for these first-time buyers to qualify for the mortgages today because you have to look at income history and, of course, passing the stress test. So job security is an important issue.
Yeah, you know, one of the big reasons first-time homebuyers are so concerned about wanting to buy a home is because rent continues to go up. The price of a single unit apartment in downtown Toronto is around $1,700 now. Bob, from your perspective, there's a lot of new talk about foreign investment being sort of cut down on and Airbnbs maybe not being allowed. How do you see this affecting rental rates, and what's your line of sight into that marketplace?
Well, there's going to be a drop in demand by, I think, immigration. Are students going to come back to the universities next fall? Because there's a lot of vacancies around the U of T and around York University. So that's number one. Number two, what are we going to do with the Airbnbs disappearing? A lot of those condos, Risa and Michael could tell you that a lot of those condos are sitting empty because the Airbnb landlords are out. So I'm seeing a lowering of demand. I'm seeing a lowering of demand for residential rental, but there's still a lot of strength in the market. So again, I'm cautiously optimistic that although there may be a little blip, I think it'll recover. Not to mention the fact that nobody's mentioned this yet. Interest rates are at record low levels. I'm seeing clients refinance with rates that begin with a 1. My God, I've never seen that in my entire career. So I think the low interest rate, I think we're going to be okay.
Yeah, great point. And we actually just got a question from Howard Biederman. Michael, maybe you can answer this one. With the Airbnb situation happening, where you might not making the same sort of income you used to make on your rental properties, do you think you're going to start to see people selling off their rental properties or their investment properties because of this?
Yeah, I think people with a short-term investment horizon will be selling their Airbnbs, and hopefully that'll increase supply. I think one thing we have to keep in mind is the first 10 weeks of 2020 went off like a firecracker. 10 of the best weeks we've had. Keep this in mind: equilibrium market in Toronto is 5 months supply. The first full month preceding COVID, there's 1.2 months supply. So as Risa was saying, 30 offers, 35 offers, 40 offers, houses being driven up $500,000 over the asking price. Mm-hmm. So I think one thing we have to keep in mind, right now, we're at 3.5 months supply during this time in the month of April 2020. That's the highest in 5 years. So hopefully, as this situation gets better and the situation is lifted, we're going to see a larger supply. There's a lot of sellers who are waiting for good reason till there's more buyers in the market, and it's easier and safer to show properties live as opposed to digitally. And I think that's going to help. But I think, I was on a real estate panel February 28th. There wasn't a single question about COVID-19. And it was a 2.5-hour panel. And the entire conversation was related to supply side. How are we going to improve supply side in Toronto? Mm-hmm. I was fortunate enough to be on a call with Mayor Tory, and he was talking about during this time, they're trying to streamline the process, the development process, so we can get rid of this red tape and we can start building along transportation lines and start getting more density along major thoroughfares. And these are our medium and long-term goals. But again, supply side is the issue. And if these Airbnbs come onto the market, it's certainly not going to make a dent into the demand that's going to be coming to drive prices down in a substantial fashion.
I just want to add to that about the rental market that, as we know now, the price per square foot on rentals in the downtown core are just astronomical. But I was actually looking today on the MLS system, and there are just in one central core, the C1 area, there's over 150 rental condos for lease between $1,500 and $3,000 a month, which is from south of Bloor to the waterfront alone. And according to the Toronto Real Estate Board, the April 2020 market report, they reported that the 1-bedroom transactions were down 57%, and the 2-bedroom transactions were down 54% year over year. Now, talking about the high-end rental market is another story altogether. because I was speaking to an agent today who said to me, you know, he said, I called him actually to say, you know, would your client consider selling this unit? It was for rent for $13,000 a month. And he said, to be honest, Risa, the people that we thought would be renting this were athletes or people in the film business, and that market has completely dried up. So a lot of the high-end rentals are really going to take a hit, a beating. And also we're seeing the high rises, new developments are coming on. So and most of them are investor units. So the investors need to rent them, and they're not going to be able to rent them for what they thought they could probably rent them for, price per square foot, when they made the purchases. So yeah, there's definitely a glut of rental product on the market today. And one more thing is, the other issue is that many buildings have said no showings. Many high-rise buildings are not letting people in for sale or for rent. So these products are going to sit on the market, and they're just going to build up.
Right, and to the point of showings as well, there's a lot of sellers who are sort of sitting on the sidelines now because they're nervous about demand, but some of them are not exactly sure how they're going to be able to show their home, how they have someone in their homes. Michael, you have line of sight to many realtors. How are you managing the sales system right now? How are you dealing with showings of properties right now?
Very carefully. So we put together a 17-page master document which has indemnifications, rules for cooperating brokers, for buyers, for sellers, for tradespeople, and it's very, very extensive. But effectively what we're telling our team is a face-to-face showing should be done at the absolute last point in time. If you can not have it at all, in fact, you know, I ate my words after 29 years. I said, it's not like people buy homes off the internet. Well, last week we sold a property for 1.6 sight unseen, with the buyer never actually walking inside of the home. But, you know, I digress. The way we're really marketing homes right now is digitally. And, you know, between virtual tours and floor plans and images, in fact, what we're saying is, when a buyer says, you know, I've looked at 5 homes digitally and this is the home that we'd like, we say, well, let's negotiate price and closing. Because if we don't get that worked out, we can negotiate those 2 important items conditional upon the buyer seeing the home. But if you can't come to a meeting of the minds for price and closing, there's no use having a live showing because there's a risk involved in that. Obviously, we all recognize that. So for us, it's health is first and foremost. That's the #1 priority. Real estate sales are, you know, 10 rungs down the ladder. Things are happening. People have bought homes. They need to sell their homes, and vice versa in the opposite direction. But we are doing it incredibly carefully, with health and welfare being the #1 priority.
Risa, I want to carry that question over to you too, because I remember when I bought my home, this is now 4 years ago, I almost bumped into the people that were part of the showings as a sign of the craziness in the marketplace. You mentioned that there were 10 offers on a property that you were part of last week. How are they showing the homes to this many people? What's exactly the process that you're seeing on your end at a different brokerage?
Well, we have to all sign these COVID consent forms before anyone walks into the house. And you're given a time, you know, no one else is there when you're there. You have to tell them how many people are coming to the showing. And you go in and you're, you know, with mask and gloves, just stay 6 feet away from your clients. And that's what happens. And they allow the house to be on the market for like 4 days to 7 days. So it allows people to come into the house at different times. And also one of the very important things is these homes are usually vacant. It's much easier to sell a house today at any price range if the people have moved out, because the buyers will feel more comfortable going in. And I will feel more comfortable if I have to go in. But as Michael said, you know, the last, you know, you ask them to please look at all the virtual marketing materials first before we actually step foot into the house. You know, and if there's great interest, then we would go into the house. And all the offers are done by email.
Yeah, it's interesting, all the virtual side that you're mentioning. You know, Michael mentioned the sale of a house over $1 million, almost like an Amazon purchase. Bob, as a lawyer, that's got to scare you a little bit. What what type of things should buyers be thinking of and sellers be thinking of, even to have part of the purchase and sale agreement to basically protect themselves from a buyer who has never even seen their property in person?
Well, I think if you've got a competent real estate agent who knows what they're doing, who has the COVID consent forms or indemnities signed, prepared, I think the offer that you're signing today should be much like the offer you signed last week, last year, a few years ago. It's not going to be much different. One of the things I've seen lately was introduced by a couple of Toronto law firms are these COVID clauses. And unfortunately, those clauses were adopted and are now on the website of the Ontario Real Estate Association, which is the advocacy group for 70,000 Ontario realtors. And I have to tell you, those clauses are terrible. I've succeeded in having them pulled from a couple of offers that were presented to me, but under no circumstances whatsoever should these crazy, dumb COVID clauses be inserted in an agreement of purchase and sale. They were not thought out. I cannot understand why OREA, the agent body, has put them on its website to, quote, assist agents. I think the sooner they come down, the better. One of them even allows for a term, an extension of a transaction, and if you can't extend it, it gets killed. Who wants to kill transactions in this time?
Right.
They're wrong, they're bad, and the smart agents and the smart brokerages are not using them. Otherwise, the offers should be the same as before. Inspection, condition on financing, the normal clauses that were in offers before January 1st should continue to be in the offers post-COVID and during COVID.
Agreed.
Yeah, no, great points. And we actually just got a question online about pre-construction. A lot of pre-construction developments have sort of held off their sales center until maybe later in the year. But I know Lanterra had a sale a couple weeks ago and it was pretty successful. How do you see the pre-development marketplace going, Bob, just from that perspective, of a legal perspective of maybe investment buyers, people not in Canada buying? How do you see that market shaping up?
Well, the good news is that you don't have to worry about an inspection. You're just looking at plans. You can look at plans over the web. And I think when people become a little more comfortable with financing and jobs, that the builder market will recover. Again, as I said before, the market is going to continue its upward climb. Yes, there might be some blips. Yes, I've seen some horrendous tales of people who couldn't sell their homes and therefore couldn't buy the builder homes. I've seen builders' homes dropping by $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 in value between the pre-COVID price and the current price. But these things were happening before COVID, and they may continue to happen afterwards. But I still think there's an underlying strength in the demand for new construction, condos and single-family freeholds.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of people right now obviously working from home, and that's cut down on travel. It's made some companies a lot more efficient. I know my company's been even more efficient now working from home because you cut out potentially the hour of travel time. With this being said, there's been talk that I've heard even from people I know saying, you know, maybe I'm not going to try to buy that house in central Toronto. Maybe I'll move out to Thornhill or further north or further east, Brampton, wherever it might be. Michael, do you see this being a trend of maybe over the next few years, less people saying I have to live in the location of Toronto?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, Jesse, because, you know, you look at downtown Toronto, and one of the forgotten facts is, in terms of Class A office space, is that you've got more tech jobs created in Toronto than Silicon Valley and Washington State combined in the city of Toronto. And all of these, you know, young tech people want to live in the core close to where they're working. So there wasn't, you know, there's next to zero Class A space in the city of Toronto. And there are going to be efficiencies. There are going to be people who say, you know what, you've been efficient working from home for the last period of time. You can continue working from home, or you can work 2 days in the office, 3 days at home. So do I see, you know, and the other thing I should mention is, you know, think about the people who have been living in a 400 or 500 square foot condo for the last 60 days. And their thoughts of, being in an elevator and being in a high-rise tower. People sometimes compare condos to difficult living conditions. You go downstairs and there's people everywhere. And that used to be an attraction, now it's not. But do I see people moving to, from the core to Richmond Hill and Thornhill? No, I don't. I think right now, Toronto still is in a position that our only option is to grow up, not out. We just don't have the land that can be utilized for building. And I think there are many people who still want less time in a car. And when we get back to a better place, traffic is going to pick up again, and people are going to remind themselves that they don't want to spend 2-3 hours in the car every day. So I think the city of Toronto, and I want to expand that to areas outside of the core of Toronto. We're not just talking about high-rise condos. People forget that Toronto is very unique. If you look at cities on the eastern seaboard of the United States, Chicago, Boston, Manhattan, how many of these cities have single-family detached homes that you can be downtown in less than 12 minutes? Answer, none, except Toronto. So the demand for homes around the city are going to, medium and long-term, be even more under demand.
Right, it's a great point. And we got a question from Norma Godfrey that's sort of a good follow for that for Risa. Do you see it being almost a 416 versus a 705 versus a 905? Do you see all those markets reacting differently, or do you see the continued growth potentially happening in Toronto and the surrounding cities as well?
I see this as a lifestyle choice, basically, because Toronto, the city, has a lot to offer, and we with art, culture, we have a fabulous transit system, and it's always been that people wanted to live in the city core, but and we've seen historically that prices in the city always increase. Whereas if you go and, which is, fine, and you want to move further out, outside of the city, because you will get a larger home and you will get a larger property for your money, that's absolutely fine. But then there'll be another development just a few minutes further north or east or west or whatever, which, someone else will have to choose from again. So the values of the houses as you go further outside of the city historically are not as, what's the word? I'm not trying to say stable, but, they don't hold their value as well. But, it saves money on gas and commuting time.
For sure. And Bob, a question for you. To Risa's point, we still have bidding wars seemingly happen. There's 10 offers on certain homes, maybe not as many bids as there was 3 months ago, but there's a lot of people who I've been speaking to saying, maybe right now is the time to buy a house. Just on our end, we've had almost as many pre-approvals for people saying they want to buy a house in the next 0 to 1 month as we've ever had over the last 3 weeks. It's been pretty incredible to see. So is this a Pandora's box situation that when we're all let back out, it's going to be a huge jump back to the market? And for people who really want to sort of beat their way to it, should they try to buy this weekend, or what do you think about the demand?
Well, it's never wrong to buy real estate. I think there is a pent-up demand. In the last 2 weeks, I've seen 2 clients in multiple offer situations. One was in Toronto at $2.7 million, and one was in southwestern Ontario, a triplex for $230,000. Multiple offers on both. There's still a demand out there. I'm cautiously optimistic that the market is going to be exhibiting a lot of strength, and it may not actually have left. I think there's still a lot of demand, and I think I don't think the demand has ever left. Yes, there's been some softening, but I'm optimistic.
Yeah, Mike, Michael, I see you nodding your head over there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think we have to keep in mind, I always say this about Toronto: the further you look around the world, the more you travel around the world, the better Toronto looks. If you want to look around the world geopolitically, Toronto looks better. And, if you look at the awards, this isn't just a Toronto real estate broker saying this about Toronto. The Economist, National Geographic, some of the most respected periodicals are ranking Toronto one of the safest cities, one of the best banking systems. You know, the government had the best balance sheet of the G7 countries. Risa talked about it. You know, the film festival, second or third best in the world. The theater community, third behind England and New York. You know, Toronto is not just that small town city. It is a world city respected by so many, and people will, when this situation gets better, people will want to buy real estate. And when they look around the world, Toronto is going to be one of the first cities they look at for many, many reasons. I've mentioned only a few. So yes, I do agree with Bob 100%.
Great. This is more an individual's question that we got over the weekend. But if someone had a pre-development that they purchased that's not going to be constructed for about a year and a half, let's say, and they own their condo right now, and maybe this is a townhouse they're buying, do you suggest now is the time to sell their condo and maybe rent for the next year and a half, or should they wait it out until closer to that time, Michael?
Wow, I was afraid you were going to ask me that question.
I was staring at you the whole time. I don't know.
I couldn't tell. We're on Zoom. But, you know, to me, you're talking about 18 months down the road. The world is going to look a lot better from this situation standpoint. And, you know, Risa said it well. It's a lifestyle decision. Do you want a condo? Do you want a townhouse? That's the decision they should be making. Not, are they going to get hurt with a condo and do better with a town? And we're assuming they're somewhere in the same community, same neighborhood. So I would say it's a lifestyle decision. They have to decide where they want to live. It's not really an economic decision. I wouldn't, you know, sell something that they bought because they're concerned about the marketplace 18 months down the road.
Risa, do you have anything to add to that at all?
Yeah, I think at the present time, you know, there's no guarantee. There's always delays on these pre-construction, you know, developments. So you have no idea really that, you know, the trades are falling behind because of COVID-19. And I think I'm suggesting, my humble opinion is they should wait until they can get maximum exposure on what they're selling. And if they're selling a condo and a high-rise building, they're certainly not going to get maximum exposure now. They should also probably, you know, check around and see to gauge if there's any other comparable properties that they have that are for sale or that have sold recently in order to decide when would be the right time for them to sell. But I think 18 months out is way too soon.
Yeah, you know, and it's an interesting time for sure. One of the biggest things that we're seeing more and more in this space is technology. Even in the real estate space, we work with real estate lawyers who could actually process an entire consumer from closing their loan over a video chat. And Bob, you know, this is your world, and you've been in this for a long time working in the legal space. How do you see this really changing from a technology perspective, not just while we're all at home, but in the years to come?
Well, for the first time in 40 odd years, I'm now doing every single sign up electronically. The government and the Law Society reinterpreted the act, which allows me to swear affidavits remotely. And I think for them to go back and reverse that decision is going to be very difficult. So from when we're out of this, if and when we're out of this, I think I'm going to be saying to clients, look, you want to come in, we'll have a face-to-face and it'll be wonderful. If not, if you're in, you know, if you're a half an hour away or an hour away, we can do it by webinar, we can do it by WhatsApp, we can do it by FaceTime, we can do it by Zoom. We've all suddenly become experts in these video conferencing technologies. So yes, I've used all of them, and from now on, I will be showing, I will be giving my clients the opportunity to sign up remotely. Getting the signed documents back may be problematic if the clients don't have a scanner or a fax, but you know, so what? We'll cope with it. And I've had a couple of times where a client had a printer but no scanner, no way to get them back. One where the client didn't have a printer, so we had to courier the documents to the house. Then we did a face-to-face video conference. Then we had a client pick up we had a courier pick up the documents from the client and bring them back so I could witness them with a wet signature. we'll get used to it. Things will happen, and this is going to be the new normal.
Rachel just asked, what about fraud? Do you see that being an issue with fraud because of that?
The Law Society and the title insurers are on board. Before I meet with a client that I've never met before, they will have to scan their ID to me. And then when I go online, I have a checklist of what I have to be careful of. And the first thing is, are you Jesse Abrams? Let me look at your ID. Yeah, beard, hair, eyes. Okay, yeah, you look like Jesse Abrams. Is there anybody else in the room with you? Are you being subject to undue influence? We have a whole checklist of things that we have to be careful of. And the title insurers have now said that the clients and the banks are protected from fraud. But we've been very careful for fraud for the last 20 years or so, and it's not going to change. In fact, it's going to get even tougher, but we still have the same fraud checklists, and now I have to identify clients online.
It's so interesting. It's so crazy to think that e-signing wasn't even allowed 2 months ago, and now you could complete a whole process online. Michael, to that point, you talked about the house that sold online. Almost half of home buyers are first-time home buyers, and about 75% of them are millennials. Millennials do everything online. And do you see, there's still such an importance to the realtor face-to-face relationship, but do you still see realtors embracing a lot more technology moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, to Bob's point, we're talking about sending, there's a lot of people who don't have scanners, but now if you get an app, I'm just telling Bob and your audience, you just get Turbo Scan. You can take a PDF just with your iPhone. So there's no need for any of those unnecessary trips. Now that's certainly better for time and transportation, the environment. But, I want to talk about technology. So we spoke a little bit about it in the way we're marketing properties through all these different services, Flipbooks and Matterport and virtual tours and floor plans and digital photography and all of these different things that are getting better and better and better. Now, I brought up that example of that property that sold without a visit because it's the first time in 63 years that we've done a transaction like that. So I don't think it's going to be the way of the future, buying homes sight unseen. That was a specific circumstance in this situation, which called for it, and the buyer was prepared to do it. But I think the one thing that you'll never be able to replace is the relationship of a realtor with their client. And, it's interesting because if you look at statistic out of NAR through the United States, the millennials and younger are, I think it's 92% are using realtors. So you'd think if anyone was going to be disengaging from face-to-face relationships, it would be the younger crowd, and it's not. So 92% are using realtors. So I don't think technology is going to replace the realtor, but there are ways of saving time. I started in the industry at Canada Trust Real Estate, and we used to do house caravans. And this is, 32 years ago, before I went back to school. And you'd spend a day doing caravan. That's when you go and see properties that have been newly listed. If you did it today, 30 plus years later with traffic, you have to pack an overnight bag just to see the properties at every end of the city. So now we're doing that virtually. We're doing a virtual caravan. So those are the type of things where, you can educate your sales team with technology on the product. But in terms of face-to-face meeting, that's really where the market is critical. I think, I was talking to a fellow in the industry, and we were chatting, and we said, it's not the synergies, the office time, etc., that we miss. We would love that camaraderie back and the collegiality of meeting together. But what's holding the real estate market back right now is the safety of face-to-face meetings with clients, with properties in a safe environment where you God willing, we'll have an antiviral and a vaccine. That's really what's separating us from going from 3,000 units back to 9,000 and 10,000 units a month. So technology is definitely going to have a place, but it's not going to replace the realtor relationship with their client.
Got it. Great points. And we have a question from Payne Levine, she said she's a realtor from Montreal. This is a good one for Bob. Have there been any clients that you've seen actually cancel or delay their signings to close their deals who purchased a home pre-COVID and are now potentially unemployed or in more dire straits because of the marketplace?
Well, maybe I'm lucky, but fortunately not in my practice. Maybe Risa or Michael have seen that, but I haven't seen any deals die because of COVID. Hopefully they won't, but sure, after every recession, there's always a boom for litigation lawyers, and it may take a few years to wind its way through the courts when they reopen. It's unfortunate, but yeah, it may happen, but I've been fortunate not to see any deals die because of COVID. Other reasons, yes, not COVID.
Right. Reese or Michael, have you seen anything to that effect?
We're actually telling our clients that if you go into a deal, you have to go into a deal with the intention that you're going to close, even in this COVID time. And that's why, people are signing these forms to protect themselves against liability. But I tell my sellers and buyers that it's not business as usual, but if you're going to sign, and now we're using DocuSign, by the way, because we can't see our clients, but if you're going to sign an offer with the intention of purchasing or selling, you have to, be able to complete. You have to have the intentions of completing and not being, saying, I want to get out of this.
Can I make a note about DocuSign? It's great for agreements of purchase and sale, but for closing documents, we actually need wet signatures. The signature created by a pen on a piece of paper. So DocuSign is fine for offers because it's okay under the Electronic Commerce Act, but we can't use it for closings.
Yeah, Jesse, just to talk about that question specifically, we've been fortunate. We haven't missed a closing. I had 2 open files. Both buyers were asking for abatements, reduction in purchase price, and one was asking for a delay in closing, and both those files closed successfully at the sale price and on the date of closing.
Great to hear. So we have about 3 minutes left. So I want to just ask one question that I'll have all of you answer. It's just the last piece of advice that you give to anyone who's concerned about the housing market. Risa, what piece of advice would you give?
Well, these are very unprecedented times, I will say. And the key factor for the housing market would be to open up the economy and improve the employment outlook. But I feel that as long as you are in a good walk score, you're in a good school district, and you're near public transport, you can't really go wrong. It's a hard time. It's hard to time the market in real estate, but my philosophy has always been that if you are in it for the long term, you cannot go wrong. It's one of the biggest investments that we make. So you have to, like any other investments, be aware, pay attention, and figure out what your best financing approach is. The pendulum will swing to a new normal. But until a vaccine is available, we may see some shaky times ahead of us. Some people will stay out of the market as they may be worried that temporary layoffs could be permanent. But the market will come back, as we have seen in the past when we weather the crises like 9/11, the 2008 stock market correction, the 2017 Ontario Fair Housing Plan, and the foreign buyer tax. People are always moving. Our industry will always be deemed an essential service. My advice, don't wait to buy real estate. Buy real estate and wait.
Great advice. Thank you. Bob, how about yourself?
Risa took a lot of what I was going to say, so I won't repeat it. I just want to say, get yourself a dream team, a realtor who you trust, a lawyer, a home inspector, and a mortgage person. Get everybody in place, go out there and look for it. And while I've got the microphone, I just want to say that Leonard's comments at the beginning about the people in our community who need help really got me. And I thank the UGA for running this, and I think we should all support the campaign, the COVID campaign by the UGA. Thank you very much for running this program.
Thanks, Bob. Great points. And Michael, I'll let you have the last answer here.
Yeah, I want to save my UGA point for the end, but just talking about, first I'll talk about residential real estate. They say the best time to buy is yesterday, the second best time to buy is today. And then you talk about commercial real estate, the best time to sell is never. And then someone gave me this one, which I loved. I was complaining about, a roof caving in on a property that we're landlords. And the person looked at me and said, there's only one thing worse than being a landlord. not being a landlord. So you have to keep that in mind. I wish I coined that. But first, I'd like to say thank you very much to Jesse and the team. And I want to thank UJA again, because it's incredible. If you look around Toronto and Israel, the impact that the UJA has around the world is just incredible. So I would just say thank you so much. Firstly, personally, thank you for having me, and keep up the incredible work you're doing for the community. And thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you to everyone on this great panel. I know I definitely learned a lot, so I appreciate it myself. And to the UJA, thank you for having us all on and for the amazing work that you all do. So I'll pass the mic back to you to finish things off from here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jesse. And thank you to an incredible panel, Bob, Risa, Michael. You were just absolutely wonderful, and it was so informative, and I hope that everyone watching found it informative and insightful as much as I did. And for anyone who would like to share it with family or friends, we will be providing a recording of tonight's webinar to everyone tomorrow. And lastly, as Leonard mentioned first at the beginning of the webinar, if you are able and are willing, we can't encourage you enough to donate to our annual emergency campaign this year. The needs of our community are greater than ever. And thank you so much again for everyone tonight. And if you need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to anyone at UJA. We are here for you, and we will help you in any way we can if you are struggling during this time. Thank you all, and good night.